Hello, friends. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here today because I have the most amazing story to share with you. It's a story from the Bible about a man named Noah, a gigantic boat called an ark, hundreds and hundreds of animals, a great flood that covered the whole earth, and a beautiful promise from God that we can still see in the sky today. Have you ever seen a rainbow after it rains? Those beautiful stripes of color that stretch across the sky? Well, by the end of this story, you'll know the very special meaning behind every single rainbow you ever see. This is a story about faith, about courage, about patience, and most of all, about God's love and faithfulness. It's a story that happened thousands and thousands of years ago, but the lessons we learn from it are just as important today as they were back then. So find a comfortable spot, maybe grab a snack, and settle in. We're about to go on an incredible adventure together. Are you ready? Let's begin. Our story begins a long, long time ago. We're talking about way, way back in history, so long ago that the world looked completely different than it does today. There were no cars driving down roads. There were no airplanes flying in the sky. There were no cities with tall buildings. There were no phones, no computers, no televisions. People lived in simple homes made of stone or wood. They grew their own food, raised animals, and lived much closer to nature than we do today. In the very beginning, God had created a magnificent, beautiful world. He made the sparkling blue oceans and the towering mountains. He made the rushing rivers and the peaceful valleys. He created forests filled with trees, sea meadows covered with flowers, and deserts with golden sand. God filled the world with amazing creatures, elephants and lions, butterflies and eagles, dolphins and whales, rabbits and bears. Every kind of animal you can imagine, God made them all. And then God created people. He made them in his own image, which means he gave them the ability to think, to create, to love, and to choose between right and wrong. God put people in charge of taking care of his beautiful creation. He wanted people to love him, to love each other, and to take good care of the earth and all the animals. For a while, things were good. But as time passed, something sad began to happen. People started to forget about God. They stopped thanking him for all the good things he had given them. They stopped listening to his voice. They stopped following his ways. Instead of being kind to each other, people became cruel and mean. Instead of helping one another, they hurt each other. Instead of telling the truth, they told lies. Instead of sharing what they had, they became selfish and greedy, always wanting more and more for themselves. Brothers fought with brothers. Neighbors argued with neighbors. People stole from each other. They were violent and angry. Everywhere you looked, people were doing things that hurt others and made God sad. God looked down from heaven at the world he had created with so much love, and his heart broke. It was like a father watching his children make terrible choices that hurt themselves and others. God felt deep sorrow. The Bible says that God was grieved in his heart. Imagine spending months building the most beautiful sand castle on the beach, decorating it with shells and making it perfect, and then watching someone come along and kick it all down. That's a tiny bit like how God must have felt watching the world he had created become filled with wickedness. God knew something had to be done. The world had become so full of violence and evil that it needed to start fresh, to begin again. But in all the world there was one man who was different, one man who still loved God and tried to do what was right. His name was Noah. Noah wasn't perfect. No person is perfect except God. But Noah was different from everyone around him. The Bible describes Noah as a righteous man. That means Noah tried his best to do what was right. He loved God with all his heart. He prayed. He listened to God's voice. He obeyed God's commands. Think about how hard that must have been. Everyone around Noah was doing bad things. His neighbors were lying and cheating. People around him were mean and violent. It would have been so easy for Noah to think, well, everyone else is doing these things, so maybe it's okay for me to do them too. But Noah didn't give in to that temptation. Even when it was difficult, even when people probably made fun of him for being different, Noah chose to follow God. He was like a light shining in the darkness. Noah was married to a wonderful woman who also loved God. The Bible doesn't tell us her name, but we know she was a faithful wife who stood by Noah's side through everything that was about to happen. Noah and his wife had 3 sons. Their names were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These boys grew up learning from their father about God and about doing what was right. When they became men, each of them married a good woman. So Noah's household consisted of 8 people total: Noah and his wife, their 3 sons, and their 3 daughters-in-law. This family was special. In a world full of wickedness, they were like a little island of goodness. They loved each other. They helped each other. They worshipped God together. God saw Noah and his family. God noticed how Noah walked faithfully with him day after day, year after year. God knew that Noah was someone he could trust with a very important mission. One day, something amazing happened. God spoke to Noah. Can you imagine? The creator of the universe, the God who made the stars and the oceans and everything that exists, spoke directly to Noah. What God told Noah must have been shocking, frightening, and hard to believe all at the same time. God said, "Noah, see, I have decided to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth." Noah must have felt his heart sink. Destroy the earth? Destroy all the people? This was serious. This was terrible news. But then God continued, and what he said next gave Noah hope. "But Noah," God said, "you have found favor in my eyes. I am going to save you and your family. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to build an ark, a very large boat. Build it exactly the way I tell you to build it. When the time comes, you and your family will go into the ark, and I will keep you safe. I'm going to send a great flood to cover the earth, but you will be protected." Noah listened carefully to every word God said. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine. God didn't just tell Noah to build a boat and leave him to figure it out. No, God gave Noah very specific, detailed instructions. God was like an architect giving Noah the exact blueprint for this massive vessel. "Use cypress wood," God instructed. "Make the ark 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high." Let me help you picture how enormous this was. The ark was longer than a football field. If you stood at one end, the other end would be so far away that a person standing there would look tiny. It was as wide as an 8-lane highway, and it was as tall as a 4-story building. "Make it with 3 decks," God continued. a lower deck, a middle deck, and an upper deck. Divide the space into many rooms, rooms for you and your family, and rooms for all the animals I'm going to send to you. Put a roof on it. Say, and leave an 18-inch opening below the roof all the way around for ventilation, so fresh air can come in. Put a door in the side of the ark, and here's something very important. Coat the entire ark, inside and outside, with pitch. Pitch was like tar, a thick, sticky substance that would seal all the cracks and make the ark completely waterproof. Not a single drop of water would be able to leak inside. God gave Noah all these instructions, and then it was up to Noah to get to work. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. Noah didn't live near the ocean. He didn't live by a lake or even a large river. Noah lived on dry land, far from any big body of water. And here's another thing. At that time, it had never rained on the earth before. The earth was watered by mist and by rivers, but there had never been rain falling from the sky. So imagine what happened when Noah started this project. His neighbors walked by and saw Noah and his sons cutting down huge trees. They saw them shaping massive wooden beams. They watched as this enormous structure began to take shape right there on dry land. "Noah," they called out, "what on earth are you building?" "An ark," Noah replied. "A big boat. God told me to build it." "A boat? Why would you need a boat? We're nowhere near water. And that thing is huge. You could fit hundreds of people in there." "God is going to send a flood," Noah explained. "Water is going to cover the whole earth. This ark will keep my family and the animals safe." You can imagine the reaction. Some people probably laughed until tears ran down their faces. A flood. Water covering the earth. "Noah, you've lost your mind. That's the craziest thing we've ever heard." Other people might have gotten angry. "You're scaring people with your wild stories, Noah. Stop this nonsense." Still others probably just shook their heads and walked away, thinking Noah was a foolish old man wasting his time. But Noah didn't stop. Day after day, he and his sons worked on the ark. Month after month, year after year, they kept building. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly how long it took, but many Bible scholars think it took somewhere between 55 and 75 years, and some think it might have taken as long as 100 years. Can you imagine working on the same project for your entire life? Think about Noah's faith. Every single day for decades he got up and worked on this enormous boat. Even though it had never rained before, they were nowhere near water. Everyone thought he was crazy. There was no physical evidence that a flood was coming. He could have been doing easier, more normal things with his life. But Noah believed God. He trusted that God would keep his word even when it seemed impossible. Noah and his sons sawed wood. They hammered nails. They sealed cracks with pitch. Their hands probably had blisters and calluses from all the hard work. Their muscles probably ached at the end of each day. But they didn't give up. As the years passed, the ark slowly took shape. It grew taller and longer and wider. The 3 decks were built. The rooms were constructed. The door was hung. The roof was put on. Finally, after all those years of faithful work, the ark was complete. It stood there, massive and ready, waiting for what God had said would come. The ark was finished, but it was empty. It was like a huge hotel with hundreds of rooms, but no guests yet. That was about to change in the most amazing way. God said to Noah, "The time has come. In 7 days I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. But first, we need to fill the ark." Then God explained the plan. "I'm going to send animals to you, Noah. Bring 2 of every kind of animal into the ark, a male and a female, so they can have babies after the flood and fill the earth again. But of the animals that are clean, good for food and sacrifices, bring 7 pairs of each." Now, here's the remarkable part. Noah didn't have to go hunting for animals all over the world. He didn't have to travel to Africa to get elephants or to Australia to find kangaroos. God sent the animals to Noah. God put it in their hearts to come, and they obeyed. Can you picture this incredible scene? From every direction, animals began to arrive at the ark. From the forests came the bears, massive grizzly bears and smaller black bears, lumbering along on their strong legs. Wolves came trotting, their eyes alert and intelligent. Deer came bounding gracefully through the grass. Foxes padded quietly. Rabbits hopped along, their long ears standing straight up. From the jungles came the big cats. Lions with magnificent golden manes walked with dignity and power. Tigers with their beautiful orange and black stripes prowled forward. Leopards with their spotted coats moved with silent grace. Jaguars and cheetahs came too. The elephants arrived, huge, gray, majestic creatures with their long trunks swinging and their big ears flapping. Baby elephants walked between their parents, holding on to their mother's tail with their tiny trunks. Giraffes came with their impossibly long necks, stretching high above everything else. Their legs were so long that they seemed to move in slow motion. Zebras trotted along with their striking black and white stripes. Hippos waddled on their short legs, and rhinos marched forward with their mighty horns. Monkeys swung through the trees, chattering and calling to each other. Some did flips in the air before landing. Gorillas beat their chests. Chimpanzees hooted. Orangutans with their long orange fur climbed and swung. Kangaroos hopped along, carrying their babies in their pouches. Koalas clung to branches. Pandas munched on bamboo as they walked. Birds. Oh, there were so many birds. They filled the sky like a moving rainbow. Eagles soared on powerful wings. Hawks circled overhead. Tiny hummingbirds zipped through the air so fast they were almost a blur. Parrots of every color, red, blue, green, yellow, squawked and called. Peacocks strutted with their magnificent tail feathers spread out like fans. Owls blinked their huge eyes. Flamingos stood on one leg. Penguins waddled. Swans glided gracefully. From the rivers and lakes came animals that loved the water. Beavers with their flat tails. Otters that loved to play. Crocodiles and alligators with their powerful jaws and thick, scaly skin. Turtles with shells on their backs. Frogs hopping and croaking. Snakes slithered along, some with beautiful patterns on their scales, some thin and quick, so others thick and slow. Lizards scurried. Chameleons changed colors as they walked. There were animals with fur and animals with feathers, animals with scales and animals with shells, animals that roared and animals that squeaked, animals that were bigger than a car and animals that could fit in your hand. Horses galloped up, their manes flowing in the wind. Camels plodded along with their humps. Cows mooed. Sheep baaed. Goats bleated. Pigs snorted. Chickens clucked. Ducks quacked. And the insects. Butterflies fluttered on delicate wings. Bees buzzed. Ants marched in lines. Beetles crawled. Grasshoppers jumped. Dragonflies darted through the air with their shimmering wings catching the light. 2 by 2 they came, a male and a female of each kind. It must have looked like the most amazing parade in the history of the world. Can you imagine standing there watching all these creatures arrive? It would have been absolutely incredible. Noah and his family stood at the entrance to the ark, guiding the animals inside. The largest animals went to the bottom deck where there was the most space and the most support. The medium-sized animals went to the middle deck. The smallest animals and the birds went to the top deck. Each animal found its place in one of the many rooms. It was like God had given each one special instructions on exactly where to go. But the animals weren't all that needed to be loaded onto the ark. Noah also had to bring food, lots and lots of food, enough to feed his family and all those animals for a very long time. They gathered grain and stored it in large containers. They collected hay for the animals that ate grass. They picked fruits and nuts. They gathered vegetables. They prepared food of every kind that all these different animals would need. Imagine the work, carrying all that food, organizing it, storing it carefully so it wouldn't spoil, making sure there was enough of everything. It must have taken days and days just to load all the supplies. Finally, everything was ready. Every animal was on board. All the food was stored. Noah's family, all 8 people, stood together, looking at the ark that had been their life's work for so many years. It was time to go inside. With one last look at the world they had always known, Noah and his wife, Shem and his wife, Ham and his wife, and Japheth and his wife walked up the ramp into the ark. The sky was still clear and blue. The sun was still shining warmly. Everything looked normal. But Noah knew what God had promised. The flood was coming. I imagine some of Noah's neighbors might have come by one last time. Maybe they stood outside the ark, still mocking, still laughing. Still going on about this flood, Noah? Look at the sky, not a cloud in sight. You've wasted all these years for nothing. But some of them might have felt a tiny bit of doubt. What if Noah was right? What if the flood really was coming? But even if they wondered, they didn't act on it. They didn't ask Noah if they could come aboard. They didn't turn to God and ask for forgiveness for the wrong things they had done. They just walked away, back to their normal lives. This makes me sad when I think about it. Noah had been warning people for all those years while he built the ark. Every time someone asked him what he was doing, he told them about God's coming judgment and how they could be saved. But no one listened. No one believed. No one chose to change their ways. Inside the ark, Noah's family settled into their new temporary home. They explored the rooms. They checked on the animals, making sure each one had food and water. They heard all the different sounds, the roars and chirps, the moos and baws, the trumpeting and chattering. It must have been like living in the most amazing zoo ever created. Then something important happened. The Bible tells us that the Lord shut them in. God himself closed the door of the ark. This wasn't just any door closing. This was God sealing them safely inside, protecting them from what was about to come. With the door closed, they waited. God had said the rain would come in 7 days. So they waited. 1 day passed. 2 days. 3 days. Still no rain. The sky remained clear. I wonder if Noah's family started to feel nervous. Did they wonder if they had heard God correctly? Did they look at each other and ask, "Are we sure about this?" But Noah had faith. He had trusted God through all those years of building. He wasn't going to stop trusting now. 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, still no rain. Then came the 7th day, 30 to 35. The flood begins on the 7th day. Something happened that had never happened before in the history of the world. The Bible describes it in dramatic language. All the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. What does this mean? It means that water came from 2 directions at once. Deep underground. See, there were huge sources of water, like massive underground oceans, and suddenly they burst up through the ground like gigantic fountains. Water shot up into the air and gushed across the land. At the same time, the sky opened up. For the first time ever, rain fell from the heavens. But this wasn't a gentle spring rain or even a thunderstorm. This was a deluge, a massive, overwhelming downpour of water like nothing anyone had ever seen. Inside the ark, Noah and his family heard it. First there was a rumbling sound like distant thunder, but deeper and more powerful. The ground beneath the ark began to shake. Then they heard the water, a rushing, roaring sound as the underground springs burst forth all around them. And then came the rain. Drip, drop, drip, drop. It started slowly, almost gently. See, the first raindrops in history fell on the roof of the ark. Then it got louder. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter. The rain increased, drumming on the roof like 1,000 tiny hammers. Then it became a roar. Crash, pour, whoosh. The rain fell so hard and so fast that you couldn't see through it. It was like standing under the biggest waterfall in the world, except the water was coming down everywhere, all at once. The animals inside the ark must have been frightened at first. They had never heard sounds like this before, but Noah and his family moved among them calmly, speaking gently, helping them feel safe. Outside, the water began to rise. At first, it covered the grass and the flowers. The lower parts of trees began to disappear under water. Small hills became islands for a short while. Then they too were swallowed up by the rising flood. The people who had laughed at Noah weren't laughing anymore. They ran to higher ground. They climbed onto roofs. They grabbed onto trees. They cried out in fear as the water kept rising and rising and rising. But it was too late. The door of the ark was closed. The time for choosing to enter had passed. This is one of the saddest parts of the story. All those people who could have been saved if only they had listened and believed. The rain continued. It rained all day and all night. When the sun should have come up the next morning, you couldn't see it because the clouds were so thick and the rain was so heavy. 1 day of rain, 2 days, 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The rain didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain poured down from heaven. 35 to 40. Life on the ark, floating above the world. As the water rose higher and higher, something amazing happened. The ark began to float. All those years of hard work, all that careful construction following God's exact instructions, it all paid off. The ark was completely waterproof and perfectly balanced. It floated smoothly on the surface of the water like a cork in a bathtub. The water rose until it covered everything. The trees disappeared beneath the surface. The hills were swallowed up. Even the mountains, the tallest peaks in the world, were covered by water. The Bible says the water rose more than 20 feet above the highest mountains. The entire earth was covered with water. It looked like one huge, endless ocean. But the ark floated safely on top. Inside, Noah's family and all the animals were dry and protected. God had kept his promise. Can you imagine what life was like inside the ark? Let's think about a typical day for Noah and his family. They probably woke up early each morning to the sounds of all the different animals. The rooster might have crowed, the lions might have roared, the elephants might have trumpeted, the monkeys might have chattered. It was better than any alarm clock. After waking up, there was work to be done, lots of work. With hundreds and hundreds of animals on board, feeding time was a huge task. Noah and his sons probably divided up the decks. One would feed the animals on the bottom deck, one would take the middle deck, and one would handle the top deck. The elephants needed tons of hay and vegetation. The lions needed meat. The monkeys needed fruits. The birds needed seeds and grains. Every type of animal had different needs, and Noah's family had to remember what each one ate and make sure everyone got fed. Then there was water to provide. Big troughs had to be filled so the animals could drink. This meant carrying water from storage to each room, up and down stairs, back and forth, again and again. And then there was the cleaning. With all those animals, you can imagine the mess. The ark had to be kept clean, or it would have become very unpleasant very quickly. They probably had a system: sweeping, shoveling, washing, airing things out. It was hard work, but it was important work. Noah's wife and her daughters-in-law probably handled cooking for the family. They prepared meals from the food they had stored. They baked bread. They made soups and stews. They took care of the living quarters, keeping their home areas tidy and comfortable. In between all the work, there were moments to rest. The family probably gathered together in the evenings. Maybe they talked about their memories of life before the flood. Maybe they wondered what the world would be like when they finally got off the ark. Maybe they prayed together, thanking God for keeping them safe. They might have played simple games to pass the time. They probably told stories. The parents might have taught the younger family members different skills. They sang songs. They encouraged each other when spirits were low. Sometimes they probably felt scared, especially when storms rocked the ark. When lightning flashed and thunder boomed, when waves crashed against the sides of the ark and it rocked back and forth, they had to trust that God would keep them safe. Other times they might have felt lonely or sad, thinking about the world they had known that was now gone. They might have missed friends or relatives who hadn't believed and hadn't been saved. But through it all, they had each other, and they had God's presence with them. They knew they weren't alone. Outside, the rain finally stopped after 40 days and 40 nights. But the water didn't go away quickly. The whole earth was still covered. The Bible tells us that the water stayed at its highest level for 150 days. That's 5 whole months. Think about that. Noah and his family were on that ark, floating on an endless ocean, for 5 months before the water even began to go down. That's longer than a whole school year. It would feel like forever. But God hadn't forgotten them. The Bible says, God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and livestock that were with him in the ark. God was watching over them every single day, even when they couldn't see land, even when it seemed like they might float forever. 40 minutes to 45 minutes. The waters recede, signs of hope. After those 150 days, God sent a wind to blow across the earth. This wind began to dry up the water. Little by little, day by day, the water level started to go down. It was a slow process, nothing anyone could see happening from 1 hour to the next. But it was happening. One day, Noah and his family felt something different. The ark gave a little jolt and then settled. It had come to rest on something solid. They had landed on the top of a mountain called Ararat. The ark wasn't floating freely anymore. It was resting on solid ground. So even though that ground was still deep underwater, more time passed. Slowly, very slowly, the water continued to go down. Then one day, someone looking out the window at the top of the ark shouted, "Look, I can see something." In the distance, the tops of other mountains were becoming visible. They looked like little islands poking up through the water. It was the first land they had seen in months and months. You can imagine how excited they must have been. But they still couldn't leave the ark. Most of the earth was still underwater. They had to wait longer. And Noah's family had learned patience through all of this. They had waited years while building the ark. They had waited 40 days while the rain fell. They had waited 150 days while the water stayed high. They could wait a little longer until it was truly safe to leave. 40 days after they first saw the mountaintops, Noah decided to do something. He wanted to know more about what was happening outside. Were there trees yet? Was there dry land nearby? It was hard to tell just by looking out the window. So Noah opened the window and sent out a raven, a large, strong black bird. The raven flew out of the ark. It flew back and forth across the waters, looking for a place to land. But it couldn't find anywhere dry enough to rest, so it just kept flying around near the ark. Then Noah sent out a dove. Doves are gentler birds, and they're very particular about where they land. The dove flew out over the waters, flapping its white wings against the blue sky. It searched and searched for a place to land, a tree branch, a rock, anything. But there was nothing. Everything was still covered with water. So the dove flew back to the ark. Noah reached out his hand, and the gentle bird landed on his arm. Noah brought it back inside to rest. 7 days later, Noah decided to try again. He sent the same dove out a second time. "Go, little friend," he might have said. "See what you can find." The dove flew off again. This time she was gone longer. Noah and his family waited and waited. Had she found land? Would she come back? Then, as the sun was setting that evening, they saw her. The dove was flying back to the ark, and she had something in her beak. When she landed on Noah's hand, everyone crowded around to see. There, held gently in the dove's beak, was a freshly plucked olive leaf. The leaf was green and fresh, not old and dried out. An olive leaf, Noah must have exclaimed. That means the trees are above water now. The earth is coming back to life. This was wonderful news. It meant plants were growing again. It meant the water was low enough that tree branches were out of the water. Hope filled everyone's hearts. Soon, very soon, they would be able to leave the ark. Noah waited 7 more days. Then he sent the dove out a third time. The dove flew away, and this time she didn't come back at all. She had found a good place to live and had made herself a new home. The world was ready again. Still, Noah waited. He wanted to be absolutely sure it was safe. He trusted that God would tell him when it was the right time to leave the ark. Then, after more than a year of being inside the ark, 1 full year plus 10 days, Noah removed some of the covering from the ark and looked out. The ground was dry. Everywhere he looked, he could see dry land. But still, being very careful and obedient, Noah didn't leave the ark until God told him to. And finally, God spoke. "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it." It was time. At last, after all this time, it was time to leave the ark and start a new life in the new world. Can you imagine how exciting that moment must have been? Noah walked over to the big door, the door that God had shut over a year ago. He opened it wide. Fresh air rushed in. Sunlight streamed through. After breathing the same air inside the ark for so long, imagine how wonderful it must have felt to breathe in that fresh, clean air. The first ones out were probably the birds. They flew out in great flocks, their wings catching the sunlight, their songs filling the air with music. They soared and swooped, free again to fly wherever they wanted. Then the animals began to emerge. One by one, 2 by 2, they walked, hopped, crawled, and ran out of the ark. The elephants trumpeted joyfully. The lions roared with what sounded like relief. The monkeys jumped and played, so happy to have space to run around. The rabbits hopped off into the grass. The deer bounded away. The bears lumbered down the ramp. Every single animal left the ark and went out into the fresh, clean world. They spread out in all directions, finding new places to live, starting new families, beginning again. Finally, Noah and his family stepped out. Their feet touched solid ground. They weren't rocking anymore. They weren't confined to the ark. They were standing on earth, dry, solid earth. Noah looked around at the world God had preserved them for. Everything was clean and fresh, like the earth had been washed and was starting over. It must have felt like the first day of creation, all over again. Do you know what Noah did first? Before unpacking, before building a house, before planting a garden, before doing anything else, Noah built an altar to worship God. He gathered stones and built them up into an altar. Then he made a sacrifice to thank God for keeping them safe, for protecting them through the flood, for giving them this new beginning. Noah's heart was full of gratitude, and he wanted to express it right away. God was pleased with Noah's thankfulness. And then God did something beautiful. See, he made a promise, a covenant, with Noah and with all people and all animals for all time. God said, "Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. Never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." This was amazing. God was promising that the regular cycles of nature would continue forever. There would always be times to plant seeds and times to harvest crops. There would always be cold winter and warm summer. There would always be day and night. Life could go on. People and animals could rebuild and multiply. Then God said, "I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." But God didn't stop there. He wanted to give Noah and everyone who came after him a sign of this promise, something they could see and remember. God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you, and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind." And right then, stretching across the sky like a beautiful bridge from one horizon to the other, appeared the most magnificent rainbow. 7 brilliant colors arced through the heavens: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, all glowing brightly against the clouds. Noah and his family looked up in wonder. They had never seen anything so beautiful. This rainbow was God's signature on his promise, a reminder painted in the sky that he would never again flood the entire earth. 50 minutes to 52 minutes, closing. And that, my dear friends, is the wonderful story of Noah's Ark and the rainbow promise. Now you know that every time you see a rainbow after it rains, you're seeing God's promise. You're seeing a reminder that God keeps his word. You're seeing a sign that has been in the sky for thousands and thousands of years, ever since the day Noah and his family walked out of the ark. What can we learn from Noah's story? We learn that God rewards faith. Noah believed God even when it seemed impossible, and God saved him and his family. We learn to obey God even when others don't understand. Noah built the ark even though everyone thought he was crazy. He did what God asked him to do. We learn to be patient. Noah waited over 100 years while building the ark, then over a year inside the ark. Good things are worth waiting for. We learn that God always keeps his promises. He said he would send a flood, and he did. He said he would save Noah, and he did. He said he would never flood the whole earth again, and he hasn't. When God makes a promise, you can count on it. We learn to be thankful. The first thing Noah did when he left the ark was thank God. Gratitude is important, and we learn that God gives us fresh starts. Just like he gave the world a fresh start after the flood, God gives us chances to begin again when we make mistakes. So the next time you see a rainbow, whether it's a big, bright rainbow that stretches all the way across the sky, or a small, faint rainbow peeking through the clouds. I want you to remember Noah. Remember the ark. Remember all those animals marching in 2 by 2. Remember the rain that fell for 40 days and nights. Remember the dove with the olive leaf. And most importantly, remember God's beautiful promise. God's promises are like rainbows. They're beautiful, they're real, and they last forever. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure through the story of Noah's Ark. I hope it filled your heart with wonder and taught you something special. Remember to be brave like Noah, to trust God, to be patient, and to always, always look for the rainbows. Until next time, friends, may you see many rainbows, and may they always remind you of God's faithful love. The end.
God made the world so big and bright. God made the stars, the sun, the light. God loves me